Hello and welcome to another episode of Half Court Press, or as they would say in different parts of the world, Zdravstvuyte and Dobro Pожаловать.
Did you look that up?
I did. For anybody who doesn't know, which most Creighton fans do, Nebraska fans maybe not so much, Tom certainly doesn't. Hello and welcome in Russian.
Would you please explain all this for those of us that don't follow Creighton Twitter?
So we'll go a really long, really brief explanation of this. So Creighton burner account, Karen McGee at Karen Mother of Two. This has been a meme-based podcast lately, hasn't it, over the last couple of weeks? And that's okay.
That was before we became a meme.
Yeah, and that's happened since the last time we recorded too. But tweeted a picture in Wednesday's snow and said, hey, I'm going to order Uber Eats or DoorDash and watch somebody go around the roundabout. And the joke, Tom, is that it looked like dystopian Russia. The surroundings of the apartment complex. And so that really took off, and all day Wednesday and all day Thursday, that kind of spread throughout the college basketball world, so much so that UNO's men's basketball account tweeted in Russian before their big game at South Dakota State on Thursday night. So this is widespread now, and hello and welcome.
You know, the people who run the social media accounts for the schools are very smart and funny and just on top of things, unlike me. But so this apartment complex, looks like it was in Russia, but it was in Omaha.
It was in Omaha.
Maybe that says a lot. I don't know.
I thought the idea was it looked like Siberia, right? Like just vast and
sure.
uninhabited.
Maybe that's
It looked like something out of a Call of Duty game.
Yeah.
is what it did. But this is a basketball podcast, not a meme podcast, not a Russian podcast, not anything in between, although maybe it has sprinkles of those things. Yeah. I'm John Walker. He's Wilson Moore. And today we're happy to have Tom Chattel.
It's late in the season.
Late.
We're tired. We got to bring someone off the bench.
The closer. We got to bring the closer in.
Hit some big shots down the stretch.
Before we start talking a little bit of ball, because both Creighton and Nebraska have played 2 games since the last time we recorded last week. How are you guys?
Doing pretty well.
That's good.
Yeah.
Tom?
Good, but I'm tired. I'm already tired of whatever it is, -2 every day. And
yeah. Russia.
We're going to get another round of snow. Russia. So, you maybe in Russia they say, well, this looks like you're in Omaha. I don't know, but that's. But isn't that funny how those things just kind of take off?
Yeah.
I guess it would be the all-timer if you get McDermott or like Carpenter to like comment on that.
Yeah, so we had a let's just segue into there, because Creighton had an availability Friday. It's Valentine's Day. Shout out to all the lovers and non-lovers out there, I suppose. We love you. And I asked Ryan Kalkbrenner, I said, do you know any Russian? He said, no. But he started laughing. So it sounded like he was aware of the bit. And then I asked Greg McDermott, and he said, I'm just here to talk basketball, man. And I think that's a really good starting point, because it's been an interesting week for Creighton. We knew that this was going to be their biggest, toughest 3-game stretch of the season. And since the last time we talked, they went out and beat Marquette. We can dive into that soon. But big picture here, then they lost to UConn on Tuesday night. Their 9-game win streak was snapped. They got some help, but for about 24 hours, Sunday's trip to St. John's was no longer for first place in the league. It is now, because St. John's lost to Villanova the next day. But this is a team, Tom, that had no business speaking Russian on Friday. And they didn't speak Russian on Friday because they just seemed so locked in to avenge a game that they thought let slip through their fingers on Tuesday.
That's usually, covered enough of these NCAA tournaments with Nebraska and Creighton, certainly more Creighton than Nebraska. But it's usually where they send Nebraska, they're like Siberia. So if we do that, if Wilson and I end up there in a month, we'll know how to, you'll have to show me how to do that
I got you.
Twitter.
Yeah, I
don't know how that works. But, college basketball is crazy. It's it's a marathon that's on a roller coaster often, and Creighton, and every day what you said. Creighton thought, I thought they're going to beat UConn. When UConn played very well and they earned the win. I thought, okay, I guess Creighton's they're not going to win the Big East. I thought maybe they could, sneak in there at the end and get it. And then, lo and behold, St. John's has lost to Nova. It was like, okay, it's college basketball. Anything can happen. But just tell me St. John's may not be ready. Are they going to close the deal? They have not won the league. There's been a long time since they've had to play a lot of these meaningful games. And now every game they play is a meaningful game, and teams are going to try to knock them off. So I will submit this, John Walker, even if Creighton loses Sunday, which they'll be favored to lose, if they lose that game, they'll fall 2 games back, correct?
Yep.
They can still win the league.
They still could win the league. St. John's has to play Marquette, still has to play UConn. And
the UConn we saw Tuesday night on the road, they may be gaining a little steam. I know they didn't beat St. John's at home, but sometimes you win, you lose a home game, but then you go on the road and you beat the same team. So
how about this, Tom? And then we'll flip to Nebraska real quick. St. John's still hosts Creighton on Sunday. They're favored to win that game by 6 points in Ken Palm. Then they host UConn a week from Sunday.
Right.
They're favored to win that game by 7 points. I don't know about that.
I don't get
UConn with McNeely's way different.
Ken Palm is
sure.
The Vegas odds I understand.
Sure.
They're trying to get you to gamble. I don't know what Ken Palm is trying to get you to do, except maybe
trying to inform your gambling decisions.
There you go.
And then how about this? Here's what I'm getting at is that St. John's plays Marquette in Milwaukee the last game of the regular season.
And they owe them one because St. John's got them pretty good.
And there's a chance that game could be the difference between St. John's winning the Big East or splitting the Big East or not.
The other side of that is the rest of Creighton's schedule is pretty much a cakewalk. The game at Xavier, that could be iffy. Xavier can play very well, and at home, then they'll probably be out of the picture by the time they play. Who knows what kind of mood they'll be in?
Sure.
But Creighton, you look at their schedule, they're not going to lose again. Unless it's Xavier. They have Georgetown, Butler, and DePaul at home. At Seton Hall, they're having a terrible year. And at Xavier. So Creighton just quietly wins out, and St. John's loses 2. They end up tied. And how about that?
How about that?
Fans? That's this Creighton team winning a Big East title. Says a lot about the state of the Big East, but it says a lot about Creighton's program too. They just find ways to win.
And speaking of teams that have found ways to win, that's been Nebraska after their season seemed over.
On the brink.
Really?
I think we described it as dead in the water a couple weeks ago.
Some refs would have called it a TKO. Yeah. Some would have let the fight go on, and one more punch would have put Nebraska out.
They were up and wobbling and
got the saved by the bell. Yeah. Bell rings. We'll coach him up in the corner, send him to the next
water
round,
on the face.
patch up a cut. Because that's exactly what the Huskers have done over the last couple of weeks. They won 4 straight. We talked about the first 3, Illinois, Oregon, Washington, in last week's episode. And then they followed that with the Super Bowl Sunday win over Ohio State. And that came to a close Thursday night at the Vault.
It did.
Against Maryland.
It did.
Really good Maryland team.
Very good Maryland team.
Really tough loss to stop the Huskers' momentum.
Yeah. It's funny. I said this to someone after the game. I don't think that loss did a whole lot to really that didn't make me rethink much about this Nebraska team.
Not at all.
Maryland had more dudes than Nebraska did, and there wasn't a whole lot Nebraska could do. It's with about I think 3 different times last night, Nebraska got within 2 points of Maryland, got within a possession. In theory, they were a stop and a score away from tying the game or taking the lead in the last minute.
Yeah.
And that never felt like a realistic possibility. A stop seemed impossible between Derek Queen grabbing every rebound under the basket, just out physicaling. That's
what kind
not
of player
a word.
is he?
As Jawan Gary said, he is a high radar NBA prospect dude. Just a fantastic turn of phrase.
That's what I'd like to think we all are.
What?
Yeah. Jawan Gary also described Derek Queen's front court mate as Julian Reese as a dog, which if you have followed Jawan Gary's career, you know that is like the highest compliment in his vocabulary is to call someone a dog. And Maryland had several dogs, the front court guys, and just, when Nebraska made shots down the stretch, Andrew Morgan had some nice post-ups, got to the free throw line, Bryce Williams was doing his thing, but then Maryland would just go down, and Jacoby Gillespie or Rodney Rice or Selton Miguel would just beat their guy off the dribble and get to the rim. Like, they made it look easy. It made it look impossible for Nebraska to stop. Now, it's worth mentioning Berke Buchtengel, Nebraska's best, maybe their best rebounder, shot blocker, was out, and that was a game that you couldn't be thin on the front line. I thought that, Nebraska fought. Fred Hoiberg was happy with his team's effort and energy, which I understand. But you could just see the talent disparity. And Nebraska, I thought, did what they could, but ultimately they just got out-athleted. I'm making up words left and right here.
Tom, kind of on that same note is Creighton, that Nebraska kind of turned its season around. Obviously, we've talked about on here. At this point, they're playing for two entirely different things. One's still trying to make the NCAA tournament. One's trying to win a Big East championship. But they've turned things around kind of in the similar respect that Creighton won 9 straight to put itself in this position, and Nebraska won the 4 straight to get itself back on the right side of the bubble, I would say, for the time being. I don't really think the loss to Maryland nullifies that or moves them out.
I don't think you get dinged too much.
It's a good loss.
Yeah.
But what have Fred Hoiberg and the Huskers done to kind of make this season everything that we thought it wouldn't be, I don't know, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, well, first, I'd like to know how you say high radar NBA prospect dude in Russia.
I'll work on it.
Get on that.
I'll work on it.
Thank you. That's what the laptop's for. Look, and this is another case of college basketball marathon. Sometimes a team can have 2 or 3 seasons in one season.
Yeah.
And that's what Nebraska did.
Good way of putting it.
They played. Nebraska's a good team. When they play well, they're an NCAA tournament team. But they hadn't played anybody. They played a really soft schedule until January. Then they got UCLA on a Saturday, early January. UCLA was cold as anything, couldn't make anything.
Yeah.
Nebraska took advantage. They hadn't been hit in the mouth, and you've got hit in the mouth in Iowa. And then they got clobbered at Purdue. That was the worst possible game to follow up, where you collapse and you're really mad. You got to go to Purdue, and you're kind of shaken up. So they got knocked off track, and that happens in a season. And it really got bad because they were missing free throws and weren't playing the way they forgot how they had to play to win games. So that's when Hoiberg, I don't know if it was like the patient where the doctor takes out the 2 clamps and hits him, on the paddles. and he did that by saying the Illinois game was our Super Bowl, which coaches never do. They would sooner open up every practice to all the internet people than do that. So they never say this is the biggest game of the year. In fact, every game is, because if you lose, then you kind of lost your team a little bit.
Sure.
So, but it worked, and they needed a little help. Illinois was terrible shooting. They kept jacking up horrible shots. Afterwards, Underwood said, "Well, that's just our offense." Okay, coach, but it worked for Nebraska. Then they went on the road and they kind of regained it. I don't think we'll see Fred do that again. I think you can only do that once. And he's right about last night. There's no reason to get down on the team. Sometimes you just get outplayed. In this league, you got to be tough. you're going to get hit in the mouth. You got to bounce back, and so now they got to find a way to win some more games. And Nebraska's a team where every game is kind of like it could go this way or that way.
Yeah.
There aren't many games where they're going to blow somebody out. So, but I like their team. I like their defense. I like this, their outside shooting can be a little bit better, but when they've got two dudes, I don't know if they're high radar dudes, but they've got two dudes, Bryce Williams and Juwan Gary, that are one of these teams is going to be the one to win the game. And I think it would be kind of cool if this was the team, because they had the guys who stuck with them and have been kind of leaders for 3 years. And, I think it would be appropriate, but it's all about matchups.
For sure.
And that's the same way with the Jays. They'll get the right matchup or the wrong matchup. It will depend on how far they go.
Wilson, the Ken Palm has a lot of what they have 6 games left in the regular season. Yeah. Absolutely insane to say. That's how many Creighton has left as well. They're projected to go 3-3 in these final 6 games. Yeah. Quite a few of them are coin flips.
Yeah.
4 of the 6 are coin flips. That would have them finishing at 19-12, 9-11 in the Big Ten. Is that enough to get to the tournament? We kind of talked about that a little bit last week.
I think it is.
I would think so.
I would think a win in Indianapolis would make it even more, would seal it. But I think even without that, I think with as good as the Big Ten is, and with a kind of weak bubble this season, that nine wins in Big Ten play is enough. And I think it's interesting, Tom. When you mentioned the Fred saying that game has to be the Super Bowl, that's 2 years in a row now. Fred has kind of done one of those like break glass in case of emergency motivational things. Last year, it was before the Wisconsin game. They were kind of reeling, and the sports science people said, "Here's the load recommendation," and he said, "Nope, we got to be tougher. We gotta get after it in practice." There was that last year, and it led to them beating Wisconsin, and now this year, saying the Illinois game has to be our Super Bowl. I mean, he said every game has to be our Super Bowl from here on out, but that meant, he's pointing to how important each one is, but especially the one coming up. And so that's twice that he's, found the right time to do it. Like I said, break glass in case of emergency.
He's been around a little bit.
Yeah, he has.
He's walked the walk just a little bit.
Let me ask you this, guys. What do you think about, the toughness question? Coaches want to be tough. Is it harder to be tough when you've got transfers?
Of course.
Because transfers, I'm not saying they aren't tough, but you're tougher, I think, if you stay somewhere and you fight through a bunch of stuff, a bunch of crap, then, I'm out of here. And I just wonder, the Huskers have a lot of guys who came in, and some came in for, I'm going to pay my last year and get something different, but I just wonder, and I think they've proven that they are tough. They did fight through it, but I just wonder about that sometimes.
What do you think, Wilson?
I don't know. I think when you think back to last year's team, I think like the 3 toughest guys on that team were all transfers. Juwan Gary, Josiah Alec, Rick Mast.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it's one of those things. It doesn't feel right to like paint with a broad brush when everyone has different reasons for transferring. I don't know. I hadn't thought of that before.
I'm just thinking about that because sometimes if the guys are, I'm not saying they're in it for the money, but what are you you love the game or the money or what playing time and everybody's different, like you said. So you can't paint with a broad brush. I'm just curious about that.
No, I think it's a really interesting point because I really do just think I don't even know if it depends on the player as much as it depends on the program.
Yeah.
For instance, Ben McCollum, Drake coach, long before he was at Drake, while he was still at Northwest. I was sitting in a press conference one time and somebody asked him, like, how do you get players to dive on loose balls? And he said, I recruit kids who dive on loose balls.
That's a great quote. That's a great exchange.
So I think that's really indicative. Like Greg McDermott is not gonna is not going to go get a point guard who can't distribute to a center. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Fred Hoiberg is not going to go get a guy who's really flashy and finesse filled. Like, he's going to go get a wing who can get up in your grill and stay in your pocket for 40 minutes and go get a bucket at the rim. So I think that's really interesting. So how do you?
I think McDermott
how do you get
does
guys
that.
to be tough?
I think some coaches do that. I've been Norm Stewart way back then, way back when he used to do that. Lon Kruger used to do that. It's forget the Dana Altman's first NCAA tournament team, '99. They go to Orlando. They play Louisville in the first round. They're not supposed to win. They end up winning the game. It's a kind of upset that was like lead to Sports Center. Creighton from Omaha knocks off Denny Crum, and after the game, I asked one of the assistants, Kevin McKenna. I said, "What was your favorite part of that game?" And he said, "Did you see Rodney Buford? He dove on the floor." And Rodney Buford is one of the all-time winning scorers of Creighton history. He wasn't going to dive on the floor. He was going to shoot the shots, and he was going to, you could pass to him, and he would dribble in and dunk or shoot, but he wasn't going to dive on the floor. And then to get the win that game, he dove on the floor. So I think you can't coach that a little bit. You can't coach some guys to do
Sure.
that. But was he going to do that all the time? No. But I think McDermott does that. They just have these role players that do all this stuff. And this year's Creighton team finally got the role players to do it. They weren't doing much at all until they got on that run.
Yeah.
And then they finally got into like he said, we finally got to practice and do all that stuff. But anyway.
Those are the little things you got to do to win a game.
Yeah.
Dive on loose balls, grab a couple of offensive rebounds.
I think that's what Fred wants to build, too. The first few years he didn't have that. They didn't have those kind of players.
Yeah.
And now he's trying to get those kind of guys.
Yeah. Maybe not let a freshman drop 38 in your gym.